Well, hello, hello. I thought today I would let y'all watch me do a little glazing. I'm going to be doing a couple of my pouring pictures, as well as a lot of my Mississippi states. And as you can see here, one of my funky pots. So that should be interesting. On these, I use a mix of glazes and oxide wash. I'm going to be primarily using some commercial glazes today. I've got a couple of things of ash glaze that I mixed up that I will probably use at some point. So let's get started. All right, on this one I've already started glazing on the interiors. And of course I can't get everything in there. I don't mind the run over on those. I kind of like that, so I'll let it do what it wants to do. And I do have this big bucket of glaze on the floor that I poured into, and that's what I'm going to finish out these edges. So I'm going to do that real quick, and then I'm going to show you how I do the oxide wash on the exterior, which should be pretty quick. These are pretty labor intensive with the glazing, just simply because there's a lot of touch up, and then of course the oxide wash is always done by hand. And I always just want to make sure I have everything on the inside of these covered. If it runs on the outside, I don't mind. This actually may become one of my very own pieces because it did have a crack in the wall after misfiring. So we'll see how that one turns out. Okay, so now that I have all of that glazed on all of the interior sections, you'll see that I do have some on the outside, and I'm going to accentuate that eventually, but first I want to do my oxide wash on the outside. And I have to handle these very, very gently because they do have small connection points, so it makes them a little bit fragile. Alright, so in this is my bowl of random oxide wash. I know y'all can't see that, but it's just one that I had, and I add to it as I need. I just keep a little bit in there and then water it down. It's straight manganese. That's all it is, manganese powder, and then I just add water into it to thin it out a little bit so that I can brush it on. So we're going to try to not get everything messy here because this is not my typical workspace for this. I normally do this over something else so I don't have it everywhere. So I'm just brushing this on is all I'm doing. It's just brushing that on and making sure that I get it all into my details. I'm going to wipe this back. So I want to make sure it's good and saturated. And especially into the lines and the textures. I want to get all of that. I will get it on the bottom as well. I'm not so worried about that right now because as I wipe back, I will wind up going over the bottom, and that will pull it through. And I know a lot of people will be saying, why are you not wearing gloves? I never wear gloves. Rarely. Manganese is really such a large diameter particle that it's not really going to soak into my skin. So I'm not too concerned about that. but I would strongly advise everyone else to do so. Do as I say, not as I do. I'm sure the older crowd has heard that many a time. Right. And I am just gently trying to cradle this in my hands so that I don't knock my connections loose. We're just going to continue on around. And then once I do this, I will let this set up so that it has time to dry pretty good in here and soak into the pores before I do the white back. Alright, so I think that's pretty good. So this is what it's going to look like before I wipe it back. Okay? So I'm going to set this to the side. And let's go ahead. I've already, like I said, I've already done my pouring pitchers. I do want them cleaned up on the outside. They are glazed on the inside, and for these I used a commercial glaze of soft green. It is a spectrum glaze is what I used on here. And so I don't mind it right at the edge, because generally I layer glazes, the commercial glazes anyway. The ash glaze is going to be, that's going to be a new concept for me. I'm not sure how I'm going to do those. I'm experimenting with the layering of those to see how they turn out to be. We'll see. I may do those two in the layering. I like the effect of layering the commercial glazes because you kind of never know what you're going to get. I kind of do know a little bit of what kind of effect or color variation that I'm going to get when I do my layered commercial glazes, because I've worked with them for so long. But they can still surprise you a lot. Alright. So I've got that pretty well cleaned up. So from here, again, I really love to see some contrast of color on my pieces. And with that, when I use the oxide wash, that gives me a lot of ability for contrast of color, because obviously I have the oxide wash that is going to turn out sort of looking a little bit like a leather color, a dark leather. And it actually makes the clay kind of look like a leathery color, so I find that very interesting. So for this one, I have some sprigs that I put on the side. I have my carving. I have some little carving here, and I carved here. Generally, I like to accentuate those. And I think today what I'm going to do is we are going to oxide wash this panel, this little lip, and these side accents. And that's all we're going to oxide wash, and then we're going to do a glaze on the rest of it. I think that's what I'm going to do. Alright, so again, I'm just getting my oxide wash, and I just brush it on. And I'm just making sure that I get it down into my design. And here, I don't want to get it everywhere, but I do want to get it down into this lip so that wherever my glaze stops, that's going to start. You see why it takes so long, because especially something like this, if I'm doing in pieces, I want to be pretty precise on there. I want to make sure that it gets where I want it to get, because this can actually alter your glaze. So if I have this completely all over and then I put my glaze over it, my glaze could react with that and not look like I anticipate it to. So I certainly want to be aware of that. So I get my smaller brush for this one, because it's just a little space here. And again, I'm going to wipe this back after it dries a minute. I just kind of like to set everything up assembly line style. Alright, so that's going to be that one. So you see I've got the oxide wash in front, I did the lip as well, and I did the sides. And then I've got to decide what color I want to do on the outside, if I want to do the same soft green on the inside, or if I want to do a combination of colors or something to that effect. Alright, so here is a bigger version of that same picture. And again, we're going to take off where I had the overflow of glaze. And this one, I have no sprigs on, but I did do some hand carving. And my favorite carvings are natural leaf binding designs, things of that nature. And that's what I did on this one, because it is a water vessel. So what better design to put on there than flowing binding leaf designs. I don't know if y'all can see that or not. Alright, so on this one, I've got this big bottom area has my leaf design. I've left this blank along with the handle, and then this has that. So normally I put more color on it than just this spot here. But I think that we are going to do this whole base with oxide wash, and then this lip with the oxide wash, and then just have this glazed. And I may do this one with one of my, I think I will, but I know exactly what I'm going to do, and I'll show you all that in a minute. But it's going to be my I'm going to glaze it with some of my ash glaze. Alright, so again, we're just going to go through here and brush this in. And I got a little too much water in here, so you see it's thinner, which is fine, because it's going to be wiped back anyway. It's not going to be that dark. It's not intended to be that dark. And you see I did get a little bit on here that you may or may not see through. I will wipe some of that back a little bit when I'm wiping back the rest of the oxide wash. I'm just trying to go in there and get a little bit more of that oxide wash so that it gets a little deeper. The main concern that I'm trying to do when I do this is to mostly get into those designs. You can see already how they kind of stand out a little more. And so that's the main focus of trying to do this like this, is to get them down into that design, because that's going to make that design pop after it's fired. Alright. And let's see. Which way do we go? Which way do we go? And some people always wonder why handmade costs so much more. This is one of the reasons why, because it takes a lot of time, and these aren't mass produced, so you are literally watching somebody create a unique piece basically from scratch every time they're doing one. I'm just kind of going over some of my lighter areas, because I know if I don't, it will not have the end result that I want. And I think that's good. Alright. Clean this out of my way so I don't get that on anything that I don't want it on. We're going to go ahead and wipe this a little bit on the side. And then I'm going to let this sit. Okay, so my Mississippi plates, I started doing those fairly recently. And they are just made with a template, and then I will draw a design on there, and I just use my fingers and randomly raise the edge so that it would actually, you know, have an edge to catch things on. So for these, you could use these for a little trinket tray, or you could actually use them for a little small serving piece if you want. You see that, you know, it's a little bit, about 1.5 hands tall. I think I measured them at 9 inches, but don't hold me to that because I don't remember. So, you know, they're just neat little trays. So I'm just going to start. I'm going to go ahead and glaze this. This is what I'm going to glaze my big picture with that has the large majority of the oxide wash. This is an ash glaze that is made with, I was going to say oak and I was incorrect. This is actually made with paper clay, borax like you get at the grocery store, and some of my indigenous hand-dug clay. I'll tell you the story about the hand-dug clay in a minute because that's kind of interesting. For those of you that don't know it, some of y'all that have followed me and know my story know this story, but others will not. I also in this put a mason stain, and I have the color of the mason stain on the back, but I'm not good enough to know exactly what that name is without looking that up. But I do know it was a yellow or a gold color due to the color that it turned out to be. So this is what I'm going to glaze this one with. And this is one of my mixed ash glazes with waste paper. And it's actually paper that I received from a friend of mine that works in the school system. And when they shred their paper to throw it away at the end of the year or the end of a semester or whatever, they bag it up and she brings it to me. So I have a never-ending source of that for the moment anyway. And that's also good because, you know, I'm utilizing something that would otherwise just be thrown away, and even though it's paper and it will degrade fairly quickly in a landfill or wherever they throw it, I'm still utilizing. So, you know, it has a purpose beyond just being thrown away and left to rot. So I'm just going to paint this all over, and this again is going to sink into these designs on here. This glaze is runny enough that, you know, it will settle into that and kind of give a relief kind of look to this. And I have tested all of these. The one thing that I did have to figure out was the right temperature for my clay and for my ash glaze. Ash is usually a very, very high temperature firing material, and I don't do that. I normally fire to a cone 5, and so I had to adjust that somewhat because this is what the finished product looks like. So it's rather interesting as well to see what color it looks like now as opposed to what color it's going to look like when it's fired. So in pottery, you also have to have a very good imagination because you have to envision, especially if you're mixing glazes and colors and you have more than one on there, you really have to envision that. Let's do another one. I'm going to pick out another pattern that I want to do on that. I think I'm going to do this one. I'm going to do this one. And I'm going to do this in parts because what I'm going to do, and let's do that now, is we're going to do an oxide wash on that middle stripe. And this will run over a little bit. It's going to be okay because I'm going to wipe that back a little bit. So I'm going to oxide wash that, And I think that I'm just going to go ahead and do the glaze on either side of that, and that's going to give it a nice little contrasting relief. And I have no idea what I was saying before I started this. Y'all have to remind me in the comments, and I'll have to answer later. Sorry. I have a one-track mind, and it's whatever I'm doing at the moment. It will come to me later, and I'll interrupt something else, I'm sure, to tell you about that. So let's talk about the hand-dug clay. Several years ago, and I'm almost out of it now, but several years ago, I was able to get some hand-dug clay from my old homestead where I grew up in Prentiss, Mississippi, called the White Sand Community. Little bitty country community that was really great to grow up in, to be honest with you, because I love being in the country, and we had horses at the time, and I could ride all over the countryside on my horses and just have a blast. But so the clay itself is sort of a lavender color. Some of it's gray, but the majority of it is a nice, beautiful lavender color. And I don't know what makes that color, but when I first started using some of that clay, I would just kind of utilize it and mix it with my commercial clay because I did not really know how to use it on its own. I did not know what the makeup of it was or anything like that. So, you know, I wasn't sure what to do with it. You know, I made a few things and they were kind of fragile and at different temperatures, and it was a learning experience that was beyond me at the moment in that time. So I just mixed it with my other clay. So one of the first markets that I went to, where I took some of my pottery that had that clay in there, I just so happened someone from the Army Corps of Engineers showed up and was there, not for me, but just in general, and he heard my story and he found it interesting about the clay. So he gave me his card and he asked me to mail him some, and he said that he would test it for me and tell me what the makeup of it was, which was fantastic. So I did that. So when I got it back, the report said that it was basically primarily kaolin, which is the plasticity of clay, and it is a high-fired material part of the clay. So without something that's going to melt faster, another material in there that's going to melt faster, then you know, I would have to fire like cone 9 or cone 10 for that to melt, and I don't do that. So that was interesting in itself, and it had a few other things in there, but they were very, very minuscule. I mean, they were like 0.001, you know, it was very, very minuscule. But it was kind of funny because at the end of that, they put as a side note comment that they could not determine where the exotic color came from. And I thought that was so funny. I laughed when I saw it, and I still laugh to this day because it's like, really? I can't imagine anything from Mississippi being considered exotic. So it was just kind of funny. And I enjoyed it, and I like telling that story. So, but at least I knew what my clay was, and I knew exactly if I was going to use it in something, then, you know, what I could do with that and maybe what the reactions would be. And so that's what I'm using for the most part in a lot of my ash glazes for the suspension agent, which is what clay would be in that, so that, you know, I can utilize that. And it's a natural resource. And so with my ash glaze, that's really what the goal of what I'm going for is my natural resources, trying to utilize all natural resources without having to go to the store and buy a lot of stuff. The other point to that is that what got me into the ash glaze in the first place was the fact that it seems to be harder and harder to get materials, and glazes are on back order that normally aren't. Suppliers are having a hard time getting materials, or they're having to change from one material to another. And also, I mean, if they just had a different batch that came from a different mine, it can be different as well. So, you know, there's a lot that goes into that. And what happens is then you have inconsistency. So you may not have the exact same color, or that glaze may not flow the same way, or a multitude of other things. I mean, it can be a lot of other things. So this way that I can kind of, for the most part, have a little control over my future glazes, as well as being able to utilize found materials or used and recycled materials like the paper. I also have oak glaze, which I use from our fireplace every year. We burn only oak. It's a various mix of oaks, but it's still oak. I have been able to get a lot of different woods like figs and things like that from friends that have either been cutting down, you know, something, or it died and they're just getting rid of it. So, you know, I have a lot of that. I have some vegetation material like blackberry vines, which we have here in an abundance. We have 15 acres here, so we have a lot of blackberry vines everywhere. So, you know, that's just something that's there all the time. So, you know, I try to utilize everything, and I have found that just like, you know, the paper versus the oak, all of these things really they have different properties, and they wind up being out a little different. Without the mason stain coloring in there, they actually will wind up having more natural tones like browns and creams and things like that. Tans, you know, various versions of those. So in order to get some color back into my work, which I really love, if you've looked at any of my work, you know that I love my color. And so to do that, then, you know, I have to utilize the mason stains in order to bring that back. I'm also experimenting with some other oxides and things like that to see about getting some color in there, you know, to see how I can do that. But the oxides, those would be going back to things that could be, they may be unstable as far as being able to get those. You know, they may be there, they may not be there, they may be changed or whatever. So, you know, the main thing is trying to focus on, outside of the mason stains, working with material that I would have available to me no matter what. Going back to the way they did it in the old days. So I find that it's very interesting. So maybe I will be interested in that and want to follow me for that journey as well, because I'll have a lot of upcoming videos on those. And if you see the little rows starting above my head, those go 4 rows high, and those are some of my ash glaze tests. And of course, like this red one here, that one actually has mason stains in it. So, you know, that's not its natural raw ash color. So that's just one. But it came out to be a beautiful red with the mason stains. And I don't have to utilize a whole lot. So, you know, a little goes a long way on those, which is always good. That's always good when you have material like that. I will say that even though the ash may be technically free, it's not free of labor, because it is extremely labor intensive. When it cools off some and I start to process some more of the ash that I have, I will show you all that process. And it's long and it's tedious. but the outcome is really, it's really interesting, and I enjoy it. So I decided on this one, this one has a magnolia leaf on it. I'll show y'all in just a second. And I decided that I wanted to oxide that magnolia leaf so that I have a little contrast in there, because I have painted the rest of it, obviously. Alright, so this one just has in the corner, I had hand sketched a little leaf in there. Alright, let's see. I think that one is going to, and it actually kind of looks like it's going to turn out to be, but it's a purple. So that's a Celadon glaze, and it is from Amico. This one is lavender. It's really pretty if you get it right. You have to put it on thick. Alright, so this one, let's get back to this one. This is the one that I'm going to go ahead and utilize this color again, my ash glaze, paper ash. We're going to put that on this one, and this is how I work to even out this color, because if you notice, you know, obviously I have brush strokes on here, and I don't want that, because that's actually what it's going to look like at the end if I leave it like that. So I'm just going to lightly go over here and just kind of barely tap and wipe and make sure that I'm leaving a lot of that where I want it to be. And I am just like barely touching this. It doesn't take much because I don't have any suspension agent in this manganese wash. It is literally just the manganese powder. So I don't want to hit it too hard, or I'm going to take off more than I really want to take off. I'm going to show you all this in just a minute. Alright, I kind of like that one. Right, so you see how it's kind of heavy and light in different places, and you see how now, after I've wiped it back a little bit, how pronounced that carving is. And on the top, and even though it looks like it's very light in here, it's still going to have a lot of that darker color, and it's technically going to come out black, but my clay is sort of a buff tan, deep buff tan, and that kind of, with the variation in heavy to light with the manganese, is going to really make it kind of just look like a natural leathery look. Alright, so get the purple off my brush, and then we're just going to paint all of this around here. Stick my hand in here so that I've got this, and I can lift it up some. The only thing I really have to be careful of when I'm doing this is to make sure it doesn't run past where I want it to. Because if the pottery itself doesn't suck up that, if a glaze has so much water that it doesn't suck it up fast enough, then, you know, it will wind up running off. And so I have to always be mindful of that so that it doesn't run somewhere I don't want it to. And we're just going to get this all over. And then if I need to touch up some places here or there after that, then I will do that. And the reason why I decided to glaze today, I'm really just, I had to really go through and pick out enough things that I could fill my kiln with, because I have a class that I'm teaching locally Saturday, and I need to fire my sample piece for that. And I didn't really have anything else going on And if I did a bisque fire in between, then I probably wouldn't have time. So, you know, I needed to focus on the glaze fire. And y'all remember, if you have any questions or comments or anything else, leave them in the comments. I'd love to hear them. If there's anything that you think that you would want to see or know about, leave them in the comments. I'd love to know. That'll help me make content that you would be interested in seeing. All right. So that's that. I'm going to touch up the other rim. So that's that. I'm going to try not to touch this manganese wash too much because it is very powdery and it will come off. So I'll try not to do that. I'd rather touch the glaze because the glaze is pretty much stuck. And I'm going to go around the rim here and the rim here just to make sure I don't have any, I don't want any bare clay showing. I want everything glazed or oxide washed. And that will also give a nice little look as the water comes off of it. Or tea, or whatever you're doing. Alright, so we're going to do the same thing with this one. And again, there's not much here, so for here, just wipe it just a little bit. I'm going to do the same here. I'm going to wipe that one on the other side a little bit more. I think I will. I think that's good. Because I want those to be a little bit lighter. Alright, and then for this, I want this to be a little bit lighter, so I'm going to really wipe that back. And also, it's kind of like painting in a way too, because I pay attention, like this has such a curve here. Pay attention to that, and I try to wipe that back so that it's lighter, just like, you know, light would be coming in on a painting. So pay attention to all those things. It makes a difference in the final outcome and what you're looking at and how the eye perceives it. I'm going to put this over here because this one got real heavy. Which is fine. But it's had a lot of powder coming off, which is fine too. I just wanted to make sure that I didn't get that everywhere, because then I have to clean it up. This powder. Alright, so this one's going to be a little darker, and I don't mind that because it's not on the majority of the piece like this one over here. It's just in those two little spots. So we're going to, I'm not going to put that in there. We're going to glaze this. What color? What color? I don't want to do it the same as there. I think I'm going to glaze this with one of my favorite. This is Hibiscus Gloss by Amico. It's a really beautiful color. I absolutely love this. I love this color in matte or in this gloss form. It's beautiful both ways. Alright. There's a trick for you. If you have a jar of glaze that the lid has dried on, all you need to do is turn that sucker upside down and pop it as hard as you can, flat on a very hard surface. I have a concrete floor out here. It works great. But that will break the seal on whatever dried material you have in there and makes it easy to open, just like that. So there's your tip of the day for that. Alright, so for this one, we're just going to glaze all of these bare spots. And again, you see it doesn't take an eternity, but it does take a longer time. And you do have to be a little meticulous with the glazing process, especially if you're not doing the whole thing the same color, which I very rarely do, to be honest with you. It's just, it's not my style. It's not what I like to do. And I like to make it even on the edges. I like to see my seams line up right, and so since this is above, I want to paint the top of this seam. And again, that's a little like painting on a photo or a picture, because you want it to basically look natural, like, you know, a natural flow of light or colors or whatever it is. And I'll have a little overflow around this handle, and that is okay with me too, because that's going to add a little interest in that area. And sometimes I will come back and intentionally, which I'm sure I will on these, brush over the tops of some of this glaze after it dries, so that I can get a little bit more of a running effect, that two-tone effect. It gives it a lovely depth of color, because you're not looking, it's kind of like, girls will understand this, it's kind of like if somebody gives you highlights in your hair and they just do it all monotone and it's all one color, and they don't give you some highlights and some lowlights, then your hair has highlights, but it's kind of one-dimensional. And so this is about the same thing. So, you know, if I have my glaze on there, unless it's a really interesting flowing glaze, then it's going to be fairly one-dimensional unless I add something to it, which is pretty much what I always do, because I like that look. And these pictures, for the people that have not seen, are ones that I created from a template that I created from a sketch that I did a few years ago. And I absolutely love them. I have a lot of sketchbooks actually where I have several things in there that I go back to from time to time for inspiration. Where I either drew up designs for something, or just had a thought in my head for shapes or styles or something like that. And I will go back to that when I need inspiration and look at those photos to spur me into another fit of creativity. And for me, that's the main thing with pottery. That's what I love about pottery. You are creating something from nothing. And it's all your own ideas. Even if you try to copy somebody else's work, it's never going to come out the same. It's just not possible. Alright, so that's that one. I will come back. I'm going to come back, and on these sprigs I'm going to add a different glaze, just so that will pop and maybe have a little running effect. And then I'm probably going to do something around here so that, you know, it has a flowing effect, and then probably around every seam. Y'all can't even see that, can you? So around the sprigs and around the spout, and then around all of the seams, I will probably come back so that, you know, you have some interest in there. I like to see movement. All right, so since I've got this out, let's do this one. I tell you what, so this isn't going to be forever long. It's already long enough, I think. Let's go ahead and do this one. If I can do it without breaking it. And I'm going to skip out for 1 second because I need to get some of this off of there, but I don't want to stick it in my water bucket. I have a secondary water bucket over here to the side. All right, so let's see if we can get some of this off without making too much of a mess. And on this one, I didn't do the bottom, so I'm just taking what I'm pulling from the top and going into these crevices. And then I will wipe that back if it gets too much as well. Because we don't want too much on the bottom. The oxide wash doesn't tend to stick to the shelves, but if you have it too heavy, it very well could. So I try to keep it like that. So we'll try to keep these on the heavy side because they are going to be mostly oxide wash. But I do like to see some variation in there, so pull things out, and I'll show you that in just a second. So it's not all monotone. And the reason why I don't want to dip into my traditional water thing over here that I'm using for my brushes is because this is so strong that I'll pick that up on my paint brushes for my glaze and transfer it, and I don't really want to do that. So it has its own water bucket over there. Let's be careful. Okay, I think I like that. Wipe my hands off a little bit. So this is kind of what it looks like. You see it's high and low lights on there. It's been glazed on the inside. And so now what I want to do is to add some color on the rim. And I definitely want that to run. Get me a bat so I can turn this around without having to pick it up all the time. Alright. So since I already have this color out and I like it, we're going to start with this. It's that same one, the hibiscus gloss. And I'm literally just going to go over the edges. And work out from there as far as I want it to go. And for this, I don't really care about the back side because you're not going to see that too much. But on the front, I want to paint enough that you'll see that running down. Alright, and see I have a drip. And I like that. So a lot of times that's what I'll do. I'll take that glaze with my brush and just really kind of push it over there so that it has a glop of glaze that will run down. You just have to know, you know, how much you're putting on there, because you don't want it to run all the way down to the bottom. And that will add some natural drip lines on there and make it very, very interesting. And then we're going to put some around here. And you can always stop it, like I just stopped that one, because I didn't want it to go all the way down yet. I do intend to put another color over the top of this. So I'm not quite ready for it to just go haywire yet. And that's about that. You won't see this, but you'll see this one in a minute. And this small one on the side is just so small, I'm just loading my brush up really well and just tapping it on there so that I've got a heavy load of glaze on there. Alright, so for this one, and I don't know if you can see it or saw it before, but at the top I just did some lines on the top, and then it's got a band, and then it's got the design below. I want to keep that band because I like it. So what I'm going to do is glaze right below it so that that glaze starts right below the band. So I've got me a smaller brush here. And these brushes, I just pick them up. They're cheap, El Cheapo brushes. Very, like, this was just a El Cheapo makeup brush that I got in a set from, I don't even know where anymore. It was offline somewhere, I think on Amazon. But they were super, super cheap for a whole set of them, and it had all kinds of different sizes and widths and all that kind of stuff. And they work so well. So makeup brushes are a wonderful thing. One of my other favorite brushes, which is not a makeup brush, is actual painting brush, and it's called a fan brush. I do like that one especially for covering larger surface areas. It just works out really well. Gives you good coverage. It's easy to smooth on. All right. And because I'm just dabbing this, I'm trying to go back and make sure I have enough glaze on there that it has a chance to run. Alright, so let's see. How am I going to make this run? I tell you what, let's do an experiment with this, and I will show y'all the results after the fact. We are going to use my ash glaze on top of this and see what that turns out to be, if anything. So we're going to use the same one because it's kind of in the same color palette, and I think that will work out nicely if it does anything. And I'm just going to go over the edge of this. Sometimes this works, and I've tried this with some other ones, and sometimes they actually turn out pretty neat, but then sometimes they just kind of sit there and don't do anything. So you never know. You don't ever know. And that's actually the way it is with combining commercial glazes too, so no surprise there. Just going over all of them. And I'm not trying to put it as heavy as I did the first glaze, the original glaze on there. I'm just trying to put a little ring up there. And on this one, because it's so tall, I am going to let it drip down. So I am loading my brush up and letting it come down over that. And you'll see that here. And you'll see that maybe in here somewhere, wherever it was. And then on this side. So all I'm doing is bringing that and letting it drip. Because this piece is so tall here that that's going to give it some more visual interest. And hopefully it's going to pull all of it down and allow all of it to run and do that. So we'll see what that turns out to be. I think that's going to be interesting. All right. Well, I'm going to continue this without y'all. Again, if you have any questions, comments, feel free to put them in the comments and I will answer as soon as I see them. If there's anything that you think you might want to see me do or talk about, feel free to let me know those too. I would love to hear that. If you have not subscribed yet, I would love for you to do that for sure. I appreciate all the ones that have already subscribed and come back and to see what I'm doing. I've been a little lax here lately because I've been trying to reorganize a lot of things. So I've been very busy and I haven't had time to make videos, but I'm almost there to be very committed to this. So y'all stick with me, please. All right. So that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed watching some of the process and I hope to see you soon. Thanks, y'all. Bye. Hello, hello. Okay, everybody, we are in my kiln / wheel room. I do both of those in here. Mainly the kiln. I have this kiln here. And I have a smaller one back here. This is, my whole shop is actually just an old barn that we enclosed and put a little bit of insulation in here so I could have a little bit of heat and cool in here during the extreme times of the year. So it's just a rough and tumble little room, but it works. We're going to do today get in the light, out of the light. We're going to do a kiln opening. So today what I'm doing is taking out everything that I glazed in the video, and so these are the results. Alright, so we had this one. If you remember this one, I actually, all my light is in all the wrong places, of course. But you see the oxide wash. There we go. And you see the glaze. And now if you remember, I was going to put a secondary glaze here, and here, here, and on here, which I did. I absolutely did. And I can tell a little bit here. I know it doesn't really look like it because it kind of looks like the way the effects of the natural glaze itself is up there. But I can tell the difference here. So that I could tell a little bit here, but I didn't really see a lot of the effect. I didn't put it very thick on the side. You can see it running here a little bit. But overall, I adore this piece. So that's the first one. That's the first piece. And that really is a beautiful glaze. I actually, for a commercial glaze, I love that glaze. So that is the first one. The second one we did majority of oxide wash on. And so this one has oxide wash here, oxide wash all over here. And this was my ash glaze. I'll give you a close-up of this. This is my ash glaze with mason stain. I love this glaze. That one's going to be one of my permanent glazes. So it's definitely going in the recipe book. So that's that one. And let's see, we'll pull these out. Let's get some of these shelves out. These are some of the Mississippi State shaped trays that I did. You see this one's got oxide wash on one side and the glaze on the other. You see how the glaze falls into those designs. And depending on what kind of glaze that you're using, that could cover your design or it can fall into it. This particular glaze is more matte and it's more flat. And so therefore it just kind of lays into all of those carving, cutting things that I did. So these turned out nicely. This was the first shelf. This isn't a super loaded kiln. My kiln overall isn't really that big, so I can only put so many things in there at a time. And I always shake my shells before I pick them up to make sure I break loose my stilts in there, so I don't have any problem. Here's two more with that glaze with different patterns. Turned out very nicely. This one I actually did. I put a light oxide wash on there. So you see it mostly looks like it just fell into the lines here, and it doesn't look like there's much here, and there really isn't, but there is just a little bit because you can see it. But I wiped it mostly back around here and left it there. Alright, this little tray is actually one that I fired for a class this Saturday. This is a tester piece. And this is done, this tray was created in what I call a patchwork pattern. And it's just different pieces of clay that have been stamped and cut and fitted together. And you can see on the bottom, you know, that it's not 100% smooth, and it's not supposed to be, because all of these pieces were layered on top of each other. And I just really like the organic look of them. I used to make these in big plates and things with different designs and themes on the middle of the plates, but I don't really do that anymore. But this is for a class. That's what we're going to do Saturday for a class. And I wanted to have an example of it. So, oh, these are beautiful. Beautiful. Alright, so this is the commercial glaze. This is just soft grain. I believe it's by Amico, maybe Spectrum. I can't remember. But it turned out really nice. This is that glaze, the ash glaze I just showed you on the one picture. And this is one that I am going to be keeping in my recipe book. I absolutely love this glaze. That turned out absolutely perfect. And this was from paper ash. Paper ash, real simple solution of things that you can just about utilize completely from around your home, except for some mason stain that I added to it. And so those are absolutely beautiful. I love those so much. Aha. Interesting. Okay. So I just discovered something interesting. I'll show you all these in just a minute. So these are the lavender ones that I did. I should have put that on a little bit darker. Thicker. So that it would be darker. I don't know if y'all can see. It's not super lavender, but it's supposed to be. So that needed to be this one's a little bit better. I don't know how that's coming out on the camera, but it does have more of a purplish tint to it, but not as much. Okay. So this is one that I used, and I thought it was going to be my blue, but it is not. So I have to figure out what this ash glaze is. I do not know. I mixed it in my larger bucket, and I did not mark it, which is mistake number one. I like it. It's pretty, but it's very rough. It's very matte, which is fine. It's very rough. I guess it would be great for, because I really like it. I like the look and I like the texture of it. So I guess it would be great for outside surface texture somewhere. But it wouldn't do well on a mug, I don't think. I wouldn't like that on a mug. I actually wound up doing some mugs before. I just didn't realize this was the same one. And I sanded them down because it was a little bit rough to the touch if you're holding the mug. And so that worked a little bit, but not perfectly. All right, so this turned out well. This is the funky vase. And I'll show you a mistake. It's actually not really a mistake. I think I told y'all in the beginning that it did have a crack in this big piece on the inside. And so therefore it was probably going to wind up being mine because it's not perfect. And this is why it leaked. So the crack is here on the seam. So when it started drying and or when I bisfire it, one of the two, I'm not sure where the crack came in, then it left a little crack in that seam. And so when I glazed it, not only did the glaze pour out then, I cleaned all of that off, but of course, you know, it obviously, when that glaze melted, it came out. But I love this. It's beautiful. It turned out beautiful otherwise. So this will be mine to keep. Lucky me. And so you see it's glazed. They're all glazed on the inside. So I'll be showing you more of these. And I'm actually going to do a tutorial to show you how I put these together. And the mindset behind them. Because they're really fun to do. And if you just want to play around with your creativity, this is a fantastic way to do it. Okay, so that's it. I hope y'all enjoyed the unveiling, and I hope you enjoy the beginning of the video. If you have any questions, drop them in the comments. Thanks, bye.